predicted drawdown of groundwater from mine dewatering range between 5 and 10 feet in the East Bend area, which would be the most affected area for water. This is where approximately 2
lady across the street.
Emco Environmental, another professional firm, reviewed the groundwater modeling results, and they identified a threshold for impacted wells. And that threshold is whether a well, the total water column in a well, would be reduced by 10% or more. This includes a 100% factor of safety, because the reduction of 20% is typically considered adverse. So using that threshold, it was estimated that 7 wells would be subject to approximately a 10% reduction in the water column, and this is all spelled out in the draft DIR. Mitigation measure 4.8. The proposal is to provide 30 wells in this similar approximate area with an NID potable water system. That is a voluntary connection process, but it would be funded by the applicant, and the details of that are spelled out in mitigation 4.8-2C. In order to consider the provision of potable water from NID, a water supply assessment was prepared by West Yost Associates under our contract with the county, and that water supply assessment determined that NID has sufficient water to serve the project's potable water needs. That went before the NID Board of Directors in February, and the water supply assessment was adopted by the board. Mitigation I want to point out too, 4.8-2A is a groundwater monitoring plan. That monitoring plan requires, again, generally speaking, the installation of a network of monitoring wells. Just get back to my slide here. Collecting baseline water level data for 12 months prior to any dewatering occurring, and ongoing monitoring through those monitoring wells on a quarterly basis. And the intent of that is to determine whether or not there would be any additionally impacted wells. And that would be using that same threshold I mentioned. If there are any additionally impacted wells, the mitigation requires the applicant to provide a comparable supply of water. This is consistent with general plan policy. That could include extension of NID potable water, or it could include deepening of the water well. So I wanted to point out those two components of mitigation, both the well mitigation plan and the well monitoring plan. Also wanted to just hit the operational noise. Noise analysis was prepared by a technical noise expert and peer reviewed by our consultant. Based on the noise analysis, it was estimated that the project's stationary noises would not exceed county noise standards at near sensitive receptors. To ensure that the operational noise, once the mine is up and running, is in accordance with county noise standards, the EIR includes and requires a comprehensive noise monitoring program. This is mitigation 4.10-3. And generally this would require installation of permanent noise monitors at the Brunswick and Centennial sites at locations specified by a third-party noise consultant that would be under contract with the county. Within 30 days of mine operation, the third-party noise consultant would retrieve monitoring data from those monitors to determine if the mine is operating in compliance with the county's noise standards. If the noise standards are being exceeded, the mitigation gives the county the ability to have the mine cease until those noise levels are brought in accordance with the county's noise standards, and the mitigation specifies some potential means of doing that. And also to point out that basically for the life of the mine, ongoing monitoring will occur, and those monitoring reports will be evaluated by the county's third-party noise consultant and reviewed with the county staff. Next slide. The draft ER determined that the proposed project would result in significant and unavoidable impacts, even with the incorporation of feasible mitigation measures, and I'd like to cover those here. The first topic is aesthetics. The creation of the engineered fill pads at both the Brunswick and Centennial industrial sites would, as the draft ER determines, result in a substantial degradation of the visual character of those sites and its surroundings, which is determined to be a significant and unavoidable impact. And the focus here is from public viewpoints, as is appropriate under California Environmental Quality Act. The draft ER does include mitigation to address the impacts, but it is determined the mitigation is not sufficient to fully mitigate the significant impact, and just generally that mitigation requires a final landscape plan, and a preliminary plan has been provided. It is discussed in the draft EIR in terms of the proposed plantings along the Brunswick frontages to partially screen features, of course when the trees are at maturity. The final landscape plan includes some additional performance standards, and that such as trees planted along the frontages shall be a mix of 15 and 24 gallon trees, and there's other performance standards. But again, with that mitigation, it's still concluded that the visual impacts from certain public viewpoints would not be fully mitigated. Noise is the next one here, and specifically though, temporary construction noise. So the other noise impacts identified for the project, it was determined that through mitigation, those impacts could be reduced below the county's noise standards. And of course, it doesn't mean there won't be noise from the project, but the CEQA analysis is required to compare the noise to established thresholds that the county has already set. So the significant and unavoidable impact here is specifically and solely related to temporary construction noise during installation of the potable water pipeline in East Bennett Road. The determination is that there'd be a substantial temporary increase in daytime noise exposure at existing sensitive receptors along the East Bennett Road pipeline construction easement area, and this is when comparing the baseline ambient noise levels. The pipeline construction is estimated to take around 4 months, so that would be the tentative duration of the impact. And there is mitigation included in the EIR to address this impact, but again, the determination is that the impact would not be fully mitigated. But generally speaking, the mitigation requires notification of property owners and several measures such as ensuring all equipment has mufflers, fitting construction equipment with the growler type backup beepers rather than the typical beeper that folks may be used to, and a couple of additional measures as well. And lastly, on transportation, the analysis in the EIR determined that there would be some near-term impacts to intersections that were studied. Specifically, the project would result in near-term and cumulative impacts, and cumulative being when we're looking at build out of the surrounding area in accordance with the various jurisdictions' general plans. So under the near-term scenario and under the cumulative scenario, the proposed project would result in an impact to the State Route 174 and Brunswick Road intersection. There is mitigation in the EIR that requires the applicant to enter into a traffic mitigation agreement with the county to provide the project's fair share toward needed improvements to that intersection, But the remaining funds for those intersection improvements is unknown and not certain at this time, so that's hence the significant unavoidable determination. There are a couple other intersections that are impacted, but the EIR does include mitigation to reduce those impacts to less than significant level. And those would include Brunswick and Idaho-Maryland and Centennial Drive intersection. But again, mitigation in that case is sufficient to reduce those impacts to a less than significant level. In the cumulative condition, there's a cumulative only intersection impact. So meaning it doesn't occur in the near term condition, which is essentially looking at a kind of a 5-year time frame. But in the cumulative only, the project would result in longer queue lengths at the Brunswick and Sutton Way intersection for the northbound left turn lane only, in excess of the 25-foot increase threshold that was used. And this would be during the 3:30 to 4:30 p.m. hour. The mitigation requires retiming the intersection and improving operations to shorten the queue length, but this facility is in the city of Grass Valley. And so as is typical under CEQA, we can't require another agency to implement mitigation. It very well may occur, but we just can't legally impose mitigations onto another jurisdiction. So that's conservatively concluded significant unavoidable. All right, last slide. The EIR also evaluates alternatives as is required under CEQA. So I'm going to just cover the major components of each alternative here briefly. And of course, all the analysis is included in the alternatives chapter of the EIR. The first alternative, which is a requirement under the California Environmental Quality Act, is the no project, no build alternative. The second alternative that's evaluated is what we call the elimination. It's kind of a lengthy descriptor here, but gets the point across. The elimination of Centennial industrial site and expansion of the Brunswick fill pile. So a couple of points on this just to give you an idea. Approximately 1.6 million tons of additional engineered fill would be placed at the Brunswick site. So that which is intended to be placed on the Centennial site, if it is cleaned up, remediated under the DTSC process, that would instead be placed on the Brunswick site. So that would result in the loss of the potential future industrial pad for future potential development. That wouldn't be feasible because of the height of the pad at that point. And the fill pad would be approximately 50 feet higher than under the project. Alternative 3 kind of is an iteration on that similar theme where the Centennial fill pile would be expanded, but the fill pile at the Brunswick site would be eliminated. That would result in placing an additional 2.2 million tons of engineered fill at the Centennial site, and the fill pad would similarly be increased as would under the former alternative. Alternative 4 is the reduced throughput alternative, and that looks at taking the production at the mine down by approximately 50%. So instead of generating 1,000 tons per day of gold mineralization, that would be extracted from the mine and then processed at the on-site plant and so forth. That would be reduced to 500 tons per day. The life of the mine would increase, however, in order to extract the same amount of resources from approximately 80 years to 130 to 160 years. Fill operations at the Centennial and Brunswick sites would also increase. So instead of the 5 to 6 years through those Centennial and Brunswick fill pads to reach their height, those periods would increase from approximately 10 to 12 years. We did identify an environmentally superior alternative, which is basically the alternative that meets most of the basic objectives of the project, but also reduces the greatest amount of project impacts, and we determined that would be alternative 2, which is the elimination of the Centennial industrial site and expansion of the Brunswick fill pile. Things such as avoiding the significant avoidable aesthetic impact at Centennial to avoid bio impacts at Centennial, or some of the features resulting in that determination. So that presents the kind of overview of the draft EIR, overview of the CEQA process, but I'm going to turn it over to Matt so he can kind of talk a bit on next steps after this meeting and what that looks like. And I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Nick. Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission. So just to kind of do a brief overview of sort of next steps. We are in the comment period for the draft Idaho-Maryland Mine EIR. So that's what we're doing now. Next steps will be is to receive verbal public comments on the EIR itself, and then with direction from Planning Commission to respond to those verbal public comments, as well as all comments received through the draft EIR and what's called the final EIR. After that is completed, we will bring the project to Planning Commission with their, for consideration, would be for certification of the EIR, as well as recommendations on the entitlements for the project, and then with a recommendation that will go on to the Board of Supervisors, who will have the final determination on the proposed project. So with that, the recommendation before you today is to open the public hearing to allow comments on the adequacy of the draft EIR from the members of the public as well as public agencies. Also be receiving verbal public comments from the Planning Commission. All meeting is being recorded today, so all comments, the entire meeting will be transcribed and included in the final EIR, and will include responses if so directed by the Planning Commission. Will include responses to all those comments as well as all comments received. So staff recommends that to open the public hearing, and then after closing the public hearing and public comment period, direct planning staff and planning and management to respond to all comments in writing generated through today, as well as the close of the public hearing. And the public review period for the draft EIR closes on Monday, April 4th, 2022 at 5 p.m. So with that concludes our staff report. If you have any comments on the draft EIR, we'd like to hear them.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Nick. Welcome. We are going to hold our comments today out of respect to all of you, so we can maximize your time. And with that, this hearing is an opportunity for the public to comment on the adequacy of the EIR. There will be no action taken today. The recommendation that we will make at the end of the day will be for staff to respond to all of the comments and answer the questions in written fashion after the April 4th closing date of the comment period. The public will have more opportunities to attend public hearings, both with Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. Today's meeting will end at 6 p.m. If anybody does not have the opportunity to speak today, the comment period will be open until April 4th, and we do strongly encourage written comments. If you have a card with a number on it, and you don't reach that card by 6 o'clock, you will be encouraged to submit those comments in writing. Where you are, I should say, encouraged. We are very eager to hear from all of you today. We're very interested in the democratic process that we're engaging in. And I'm just going to give some rules for the road here. I can summarize it with the less that I have to participate today, the more you guys get to participate, and the better it will be. So what we're looking at is the adequacy of the EIR. An EIR should be prepared with a sufficient degree of analysis to provide decision makers with information which will enable them to make a decision which intelligently takes into account environmental consequences. An evaluation of the environmental effects of the proposed projects need not be exhaustive, but the sufficiency of the EIR is to be reviewed in light of what is reasonably feasible. Disagreement among experts does not make the EIR inadequate, but the EIR should summarize the main points of disagreement among the experts. The courts have looked not for perfection, but for adequacy, completeness, and good faith effort in full disclosure. An EIR does not consider finances or background of the applicant. Comments, the likes or dislikes of the project are not appropriate for comments on the EIR here today. There will be time for that during the project hearing later. Economic, social effects of the project should not be treated as significant effects on the environment. I, as your chairman of the Planning Commission, may use discretion to determine when comments are duplicative or or repetitive, and ask the commenter to stop and allow others with new concerns the opportunity to speak. What I mean there is, again, if you've got a script that's the same as everybody else's, if you're in possession of that, either modify it or consider just putting it in writing. You're taking time from your constituent team when we do that. And again, we'll need to use my discretion as to if that needs to be shut down. Comments are limited to 3 minutes unless by representing an organization, they will have 5. And at the end of 3 minutes, the microphone will automatically turn off. So please keep that in mind. Clapping, cheering, and applause will not be tolerated. If you really like something, you can show us, but please don't be disruptive. Personal attacks will not be tolerated. We will hear from as many as possible. And again, public comment is open until April 4th. Once again, please limit any comments to the advocacy of the EIR. And the EIR must be prepared with sufficient degree of analysis to allow decision makers to make an informed decision that takes into account the environmental consequences of the project. With that, we will open public comment. Do we have how many are we going to line up now? Or I should say, fire marshal?
The plan was to have 10 people in a queue. They'll take their turn at the podium and then exit through the center row or return to their seats. So I think numbers were issued for people wishing to speak upon entry. So we'll start with number 1 if they're in the audience and follow suit. So just no more than 10 in the line, please.
Excuse me. I'm unable to stand for a length of time, so I'm just going to have someone sit in my spot.
That's fine, thank you.
Okay, if we can queue up the first 10. And please state your name and address so we can respond to you, please.
My name is Al Wolf. I live at 11482 Ridge Road in Nevada City, Crusade. I found the whole EIR very complete. I reviewed the one at Rancho Seco where I worked at the nuclear power plant, and it was very comparable to everything being covered. I also have experience in the nuclear Navy with water treatment under Admiral Rickover. And their water treatment parallels what we had in the Navy aboard the Enterprise to protect our 8 reactors, which was 2 parts per billion. Also, with the world situation today, the minerals that are down there, not only gold, but also tungsten, which is used as anti-tank munitions, should be considered strategic materials. We need those materials badly. And with all electronic systems functioning today and with hypersonic missiles and so on, all needing gold contacts. Remember, gold will carry a charge and not corrode. So it's very important in all these strategic electronic systems. So what we have here is essential to our nation's future, looking at potential war with Russia and China. Thank you.
Thank you, Al. And again, I'll just remind, if you would please hold your comments to adequacy of the EIR.
Hello, thank you. I'm Ralph Silverstein, president of CEA Foundation. CEA stands for Community Environmental Advocates. We are also the sponsor of Mine Watch. Over a year ago, CEA established a research team composed of various talented and concerned community members and representatives from other community groups. I'm told there are over 400 people out here. We have a wide range of expertise, varying from a general building contractor to people holding MBA degrees. geologists, a PhD in civil and environmental engineering, a master's in computer science, science teachers, an author, and others are among our ranks. We have also hired expert consultants to address certain areas, and our legal representative is Schutt and Hailing Weinberger, who will be submitting detailed comments on the draft. Our goal has been to review the technical studies for the mine project for the purpose of public education, and to review the draft EIR extensively to assure that the EIR is accurate and adequate. In summary, we have conducted an extensive review. What is most surprising is that after well over a year in the preparation to produce a massive document, it has so many missing elements and so many inadequate assessments. Starting with the most fundamental aspects, a good EIR relies upon adequate and reliable data in order for the decision makers, that's you, to be adequately informed. Yet in this draft, we find almost no useful test results for assessing air or water quality hazards from mine waste. For example, to determine air quality impacts, the results rely upon data that is collected from inadequate sampling that was also processed incorrectly. Hydrology studies rely upon narrow bands of data that were collected over 15 years ago, and even these data are misinterpreted in some cases. Even at the higher level, the project fails to address important areas of study and omits the Centennial cleanup on Idaho-Maryland Road. The extensive mine caving waste that is on the Centennial site is currently part of a cleanup project that is still not even approved by the Department of Toxic Substances Control, or DTSC. The site contains contaminants such as arsenic and lead and more that pose potential hazard to people and the environment. Correspondence from the EPA in 2019 stated that the Centennial site's potential designation as a Superfund site was conditionally deferred because Rise entered into a cleanup contract with the DTSC. Yet this draft EIR is based upon an assumption that it is already cleaned up. The examples of inadequacies are abundant. Members of our organization will touch on some of them today, and they will be fully documented in our written comments, which will be submitted on March 30th. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ralph.
Good morning, greetings. I'm Barbara Ravines. I've lived in Grass Valley for the last 8 years, of our 25 years here. I am a member of the CEA Foundation and active in many other organizations in the county.
Barbara, will you give us your address?
Pardon me?
Address?
Oh, thank you, I may screw that up. 108 Richard Court, Grass Valley, sorry. I thank the Planning Commission and the department actually for its hard work on this project. My interest is groundwater impacts and mitigations. In the DEIR, groundwater impacts are concluded to be significant but avoidable mitigation. It was the DEIR's conclusion that inadequate analysis, unreliable monitoring, unfounded impact criteria, and mitigation measures that are of unproven effectiveness. We need to know with accuracy what could happen to the hundreds of residential wells in the impact area of this vast underground mine when it begins operations over the next 80 years. Of critical concern, the proposed project would significantly affect local groundwater resources by dewatering the mine, lowering groundwater levels. The DEI recognizes groundwater levels to be lowered to 242 well owners, but then assumes that having one's well water go down a couple of feet is not a problem. Considering that we are in a long-range drought and worsening climate change, this arbitrarily low impact threshold is invalid. The mitigations proposed by the DEIR are inadequate. Foremost, because there is a potential impact to well owners in the area, a comprehensive monitoring plan must be implemented prior to dewatering to establish a baseline. The monitoring should run at least 3 years. The monitoring plan that has done for the 2008 application is outdated, does not cover enough area, and is based on only operating for 20 years. Unreliable monitoring. Models of the groundwater in fractured rock have serious reliability issues. The model used is DEIR, assumes that the rock mass is homogeneous. There are too many faults and too little data to trust that model to produce valid results. Plus, the model assumes that the mining will be limited to very narrow region, and yet even in the hydrological model report, it shows that proposed mining that extends outside of the mineral rights zone. I'm going to say essentially no water balance assessment was provided as well, and these issues need to be rectified on DEIR in order to be.
Thanks, Barbara, and thanks for working through the little interruption there. Cell phones off, please. That'll help.
Welcome. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak. My name is Paul Schwartz. I live at 13812 Meadow Drive, Grass Valley, in District 1. I came to Nevada City in 1971. I have an AA, a BS, and an MBA in Business Administration. I was Director of Maintenance and Operations for Pleasant Ridge School District for 19 years, and a Capital Planner at UC Davis for 10 years. I was a member of the Grass Valley Planning Commission for 6 years and Parks and Recreation Commission for 2. And I'm a volunteer with the Community Environmental Advocates Foundation. We agree with the DEIR conclusion that the aesthetic impacts of the mine project will be significant and unavoidable. We feel throughout the DEIR, our local conditions are seriously undervalued. Brunswick Road is concluded to have only moderate visual sensitivity because it includes a past industrial site and moderate traffic levels with corresponding moderate number of viewers. This ignores the fact that it is a major entryway into the Brunswick Basin. As an entryway, it will continue to grow in importance and traffic volume. It represents the first impression for many guests in our community and should not be dismissed because it does not have a scenic designation. There is a direct link between our economic success and the natural beauty of our area. Brunswick Road will become busier and busier and should be recognized and protected from development that impacts its future success as an entryway to our community and a major arterial. These issues should be added to the DEIR. Mitigation 4.1-3. The DEIR concludes that the mine project will not create a new source of substantial light and glare, which would adversely affect day or nighttime views in the area. We disagree. Regardless of previous industrial activity at this location, decades have passed since their departure, and the area is now predominantly rural, residential, and quite dark at night. The new level of light from project lighting and the nighttime hauling described in the DIR would be unacceptable given the current low, very low ambient night lighting of the area. Dismissing these impacts is unacceptable. An analysis that recognizes these impacts must be part of the DIR. The impact is likely unavoidable. The DIR describes the no project alternative in terms that maximize the development of the Brunswick property. As a result, the alternative use option was not considered. In reality, an industrial mixed-use project is a distinct option in the future that might include utilities, manufacturing, information, R&D, real estate, professional, the arts, entertainment, recreation. All of these would create more jobs, use less energy, have lower carbon footprints, and generate more local wealth than the Rise Gold proposal. The alternative sections of the DR needs to be more honest and professional in describing alternatives to the Rise Gold proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Good morning. I'm Bill Clark. I live at 324 Vistamont Drive, Grass Valley. I'm a member of the CEA Foundation. I'm a 21-year resident of Grass Valley and a retired aerospace engineer with a master's degree in systems analysis and electrical engineering. My experience has been in systems analysis and systems integration, and as a past member of the Nevada County Civil Grand Jury, I was involved in the publication of a report on the air quality in Nevada County. Nevada County currently gets an F rating when it comes to air quality,
and we have twice the state average in lung disease. Fugitive dust from rock crushing and transport, diesel exhaust from constant truck traffic, and the presence of asbestos fibers and dust will make a bad situation much worse. The DEIR does not adequately discuss these impacts. The issue of controlling fugitive dust during construction activities is not adequately addressed beyond keeping the roadways wet or suspend operation when the wind blows. The issue of diesel exhaust from constant truck traffic is not adequately addressed beyond using equipment with Tier 4 engines, but only on equipment owned by Rise Gold. There will be pollutants and toxic particles generated underground by drilling and blasting that may be exhausted from the headframe vent stack. These pollutants consist of toxic airborne contaminants, asbestos fibers, and silica dust. Mitigations are proposed to prevent this, but they are not adequate. The ASUR plan attempts to minimize asbestos fibers and fragments from being carried to the surrounding environment, but this is a plan, not a mitigation. Rise Gold owns more than 2,500 acres of mineral rights and has drilled 19 exploration drill holes for asbestos sampling and ore assessments. The sampling analyses and test results are questionable. There's an inadequate discussion of the sampling process itself. How are tons of rock left sitting in the silo until testing has been completed to be kept safe from the release of toxic materials? What happens when multiple loads of mine materials exceed the asbestos threshold? Finally, additional air quality monitoring stations have not been proposed to accumulate pollution data to measure how well the mine is performing with respect to air quality criteria. This is just a tip of the iceberg considering air quality impacts. To the county staff and planning commission, you must continue your due diligence and dig deeply into the DEIR.
Thank you, Bill.
Advocate for a revised DEIR.
Really appreciate your comment.
Good morning. My name is Bob Hubbard. I am a resident of Grass Valley, living on property directly adjoining the Brunswick industrial site. I'm a retired symphony musician, taught at Stanford University, and I'm also a machinist operating a small manufacturing business, so I fully understand both sound and measurement. I'm a member of CEA. False assumptions and pure conjecture used to invent conclusions about reality. For instance, the ambient sound levels measured and used for this study date back to 2017-18. This is inaccurate data. The ongoing consequences of this project will not be known until after the initial construction is finished and the operation of the mine commences, these take 4 to 5 years in the future. The study should look at projected future neighborhood growth and make a reasonable evaluation of additional noise in the context of future ambient conditions in which the mine would be operating. The study chose to measure the sound levels of the nearest receptors, the neighboring parcels, at the property owners' homes, which are located at the greatest distance from the source of the sound. The true impact of the noise on these parcels can only be determined by measuring at the property boundary. According to the county general plan, the decision to measure the boundary is a county decision, so I am asking the county to make this a requirement. The wording of the study is such that any level of noise that would not get the operation cited for a noise violation is acceptable. I have measured the noise level of the garbage truck collecting my garbage from 39 decibels inside my house. The study says the constant and continuous noise level of the Brunswick site will be 85 decibels, more than 20 times that loud, from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., 7 days a week. Think about how far away you can hear that garbage truck and ask yourself if you want that noise to be a constant part of your life. The study dismisses the nighttime noise levels as not significant But that conclusion, once again, is based on estimated data and does not take into account that nighttime is a rural, inner rural residential area is not the same as nighttime downtown. It gives the surrounding community 8 hours of lesser noise each day, so you better get to sleep at 10 if you want to get your rest. We retired folks don't live on the clock. We have a quiet rural neighborhood. Despite the study's denials, there is wildlife living on our property and the mine property. Dear one to the neighborhood community, there is a resident owl who hoots softly in the evening. We have a neighborhood bear that visits from time to time. The operation of this mine will drive the wildlife away, and that and the associated noise will totally change the character of the neighborhood and Retro Grass Valley from the peaceful rural setting to the noisy urban industrial complex, totally unlike it is today. The DEIR must be redone to address these and other issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Cell phones, there's an off switch on the side of them, please use it.
Could you have the speaker's microphone turned up? Very hard to hear.
Did you get the Shelley or Jeff, if we can bring the speaker's microphone up?
Unfortunately, that is the volume of the speaker for the feedback, so if we can get everyone to just speak a little bit higher, please.
Or pull the microphone in?
You're right.
My name is Don Ravines. I've lived in Nevada County for 18 years. I've now lived at 108 Bridger Court in Grass Valley for the last 8 years. I worked as a systems analyst for 44 years, managing a software company consulting with large banks and conservation sheriffs, Sierra Foothills Audubon Society. I am a member of the Nevada County and Grass Valley Energy Action Plan working groups, coordinating chair of Nevada City 100% Renewables Committee, and am a member of the Community Environmental Activist Foundation. In 2018, Nevada County adopted an energy action plan to assist the county in implementing the energy goals and policies in the county's general plan and inform the community of best practices that will help them save energy and money. The energy action plan calls for a 51% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions for electricity use by 2035, which is in close alignment with state goals. The plan forecasts residential energy reduction savings from building efficiency of 42 million kilowatt hours per year. The DER states that the amount of electricity required to operate the mine would be approximately 49 million kilowatt hours per year, which would erase any residential electricity savings attained by the plan. Even more stunning when you know that the total non-residential electric use of the county in 2017 was 53 million kilowatt hours a year. So this one mining project would almost match all other non-residential electricity use in the county and wipe out the projected 9 million kilowatt hour years non-residential efficiency savings. Asking residents and business owners to cut down the use of electricity while allowing the electricity use of the mine would be highly counterproductive. The DER must explain how the project intends to comply with the goals of the Nevada County Climate Action Plan. Efficiency standards. For the years 2033 to 2102, the DER shows 9,000 metric tons of annual greenhouse gas emission and declares them to be under the threshold of significance. The DER seeks to justify its chosen significant threshold of 10,000 megatons of CO2 for operational greenhouse gas emissions by looking to other air district standards. This standard from other air districts was based on old California requirements and is not consistent with the SB 32 statewide greenhouse gas reduction goals for 2030 and beyond. The DER must use a significant threshold that will achieve California's new statewide greenhouse gas reduction goals over the proposed 60-year lifetime of the project. Considering state goals and the severity of climate change, any operational greenhouse gas emissions over existing conditions are significant. The project should be net zero, so it will not mitigate these critical impacts below the significant level.
Thank you, Don.
Morning. My name is Ray Bryars, and I live in Northview Drive in Nevada City. I got a BASc in electrical engineering, 38 years of engineering experience in the TV products industry, and I did 14 years in retirement, and CEA is one of my volunteer activities. to define water treatment criteria. Unfortunately, this information is outdated since it was from only one sample. The same report's analysis showed water flow from the near the surface seeps into that shaft, goes down into the mine, and flows out over a mile away from the point where the mine drains into Wolf Creek, near Centennial Drive. A more accurate sampling would be from locations where the water has actually flowed through a part of the mine. A couple of sample sets were taken from drains in a single month of 2018. These samples indicated higher levels of iron, manganese, arsenic, aluminum, and zinc than the New Brunswick shaft samples. These values today exceed safe water quality standards, and the contaminated water continues to flow into Wolf Creek. The DEIR has not provided enough information to correctly assess the potential water quality impacts from the mine. The only accurate way involves testing samples from regions within the mine itself. The current DEIR assessment of water quality impact is inadequate. Concerns must be evaluated and recirculated for public review. Explosives. On page 4.728, the DEIR specifies no mining proposed closer than 500 feet from the surface. Thus, explosives in transit would be at least this far from the surface. This makes no sense, since one or more years of construction activity will require explosives prior to the construction of the longer-term storage facilities underground. The DEIR fails to identify quantity, type, or management of early phase explosives during construction. This must be identified as a significant impact that cannot be mitigated. 28,000 pounds of explosives would be stored underground at any given time. Approximately every 2 weeks, trucks carrying explosives will be taking the off-ramp from Highway 2049 at Brunswick Road and driving through the heavily used intersection past the new Loma Rica development and then under the airport. This is defined in the EIR as a significant impact which can be mitigated, but the mitigations are inadequate. It must be listed as significant and unavoidable. There is substantial community concerns about impacts to the airport and the air tankers that keep us safe during fire season. Many other significant issues with explosives cannot be mitigated.
Thank you, Ron. We will be breaking for lunch at 12 o'clock. How are you guys doing for that schedule?
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Jillian Blanchard, and I'm a member of CEA. My home is 19159 Rivercrest in Grass Valley, and thank you for taking the time to listen to us today. I have been a land use attorney for over 20 years, and I have grave concerns with this draft EIR. I'll send a comment letter with details, but I want to focus today on two fatal flaws. First, the failure to identify and analyze the full project, and second, the use of a future baseline that assumes the cleanup of Centennial has already happened, but it hasn't. CEQA requires the draft EIR to identify the whole of the action as a single and complete project to analyze all potential impacts. It prohibits expressly any attempt to separate out a portion of the project, mainly because doing so leads to an underestimate of impacts and does not inform the public of the actual damage this project will cause. The draft EIR fails this basic CEQA requirement by segmenting out the Centennial cleanup from the project, which results in an undercounting of impacts. The draft EIR approach feels a bit like a bait and switch from what was promised to the public originally. The NOP identified the Centennial cleanup originally as a, quote, essential part of this project that would be analyzed in this CEQA document. The project involves, as you know, placement of mine waste onto 44 acres of the Centennial site, which can only happen once it's cleaned up by Rise, which so it's a necessary part of this project. But incredibly, the draft EIR removes this huge component of the project and assumes that all of the grading, truck traffic, air quality impacts associated with the cleanup at Centennial, including impacts to 4 acres of wetlands, has magically already happened. Doing this allows the draft EIR to ignore critical impacts, including cumulative impacts of the Centennial cleanup. For example, the draft EIR assumes that half of the Centennial site has already been disturbed by the cleanup, which conveniently cuts the biological impacts in half. The design itself may change. It is still under review by DTSC, it has not been approved, and the cleanup definitely has not yet happened. CEQA requires the whole project to be reviewed together to get an accurate picture of impacts from the mine waste. What's worse, the draft EIR assumes that the cleanup has been completed for 5 environmental impacts, but then assumes it hasn't been done for the remaining 8. This approach is dangerously inconsistent and does not comply with CEQA. In over 20 years of land use practice, I have never seen this done. It exposes the county to significant legal liability and allows Rise to play a shell game, hiding impacts between the 2 projects. To protect itself and this community, the county must include the Centennial cleanup and recirculate this draft EIR. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill.
Lori Overholzer, 310 Nevada Street. I'm a CEA board member and a 37-year resident of Nevada City. I served on the City Council and Planning Commission for 19 years with the term as mayor. And I'm also a city and environmental planner. And as a consultant, I have written many EIRs throughout Northern California for the past 30 years. You've heard many of our members just now conclude that the DEIR has underestimated the impacts of the mine and needs extensive additional re-examination, analysis, and mitigation measures. So here's a quick summary of some of the points we've just made. Surface water quality impacts are underestimated, including drainage reaching Wolf Creek with excessive levels of iron, manganese, arsenic, aluminum, and zinc. Groundwater and well impact discussions are inadequate, including ignoring the impacts to most well owners and an unreliable groundwater model in our fractured bedrock system, which affects groundwater flow, as many of us know firsthand. The air quality section lacks adequate mitigation to protect workers and the public from adverse health impacts associated with the most feared constituents of mine dust, asbestos and silica. The greenhouse gas and energy use sections are also severely lacking. The DEIR neglects to make it clear that this one mining project using 49 million kilowatts per hour of electricity would erase any residential electricity savings attained by the Nevada County Energy Action Plan. Nighttime noise and vibration and sleep disturbance, plus impacts to residents from a substantial increase in the very quiet ambient noise in the area are dismissed. And also, long-term impacts to 24-hour noise exposure over the entire lifetimes of area residents has also been not evaluated. The DEIR also needs to explore a wider range of alternatives, including an alternative land use that better reflects our community needs and which can eliminate these impacts and the many other impacts that are likely to be revealed in the final EIR after the comments received today are evaluated. And finally, again, we simply do not understand the complete exclusion of the Centennial waste cleanup site from the DEIR discussion. This is a major flaw. The DEIR clearly will need recirculation after it is revised. I do hope that the planning commissioners will also take the opportunity today to ask the consultants to bring back additional evaluation that you personally think is particularly needed. And we hope that our comments today will help you to be better informed on this community-changing project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Christy Hubbard. My address is 12966 Mink Court in Grass Valley. Today I'm talking as a representative of the Wells Coalition, and we're a group of well owners in the vicinity of the mineral rights area of the Idaho-Maryland Mine. After reviewing the DEIR, we feel the well mitigation plan is not adequate. A key concern is that the county has failed to adequately define the true area of potential impact. The report repeatedly acknowledges the high level of uncertainty in hydrological models You've heard a lot about that today, and you'll hear more, I'm sure. And yet the applicant has a mitigation plan for only 30 properties. There's no acknowledgement of risk or plan to safeguard domestic wells in the surrounding area. Since public records tell us that there are roughly 525 private wells within a half mile of the mineral rights boundary, this is a significant concern. Bear in mind that this project is asking for an 80-year use permit, and there's no reason to believe that Rise Gold will constrain their mining to one small area for the entire amount of the time. Consider this scenario. One day, a homeowner turns on the tap and there's no water. It would be nearly impossible to prove that the mining operation caused damage because there is no plan to keep a reliable record of the well use or the well history. Neighborhoods would need to find immediate funding for water trucks and likely hundreds of thousands of dollars to connect to NID for a long-term solution. And based on current estimates, it would take years to restore that water service. And furthermore, selling their home during that time would not be an option because a home without water is of no value whatsoever. This is not the first time Nevada County has faced concerns about wells in the area of the mine. The last time it happened, however, the county provided a much more comprehensive system of safeguards for nearby residents. In 1996, Emperor Gold was granted a use permit to dewater the mine for exploration, which required protections for wells in a designated study area. In addition to the NID hookups for the homes on Bennett Road, it included multiple years of well monitoring, a community relations program, retention of an independent groundwater consultant, pre-approval of all NID connection permits, and cash, bonds, and security to cover expenses for replacement water. All of this was done for 5 years of exploration. It didn't include 80 years of mining. On behalf of myself and well owners in the vicinity of the mine, we respectfully request that the final report provide significantly better safeguards for well owners. The potential impacts to well owners has been recognized by experts, and these impacts must be addressed by CEQA. Final report must fully identify the potential impact area and articulate a complete set of safeguards. This county has done better for us in the past. Given the enormous scope of the project, we need a much more comprehensive plan for the future. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Catherine Gerway. I live at 11147 Squirrel Creek Road in Grass Valley. I've done extensive traveling all over the country. I settled in Grass Valley because it's one of the nicest little towns I've been in. I like it here, and I'd like to stay. However, the noise level, I don't think anyone in Grass Valley that lives here knows when the fair is here, or doesn't know when the fair is here. And they stay below the noise level. You can still hear them, and all those trucks, you can still hear them below noise level, fine, but not low enough. And we'll have to replace the roads as well because of all those trucks. The iron, mercury, cyanide, and arsenic are important to be able to separate the rock from the gold, and will be used. Too bad Eric Brockovich isn't here today, because if you want to drink that water after it's been purified, go ahead. That's when you're going down Wolf Creek right in the middle of Grass Valley, and that's a little poisonous to me. And I'm sure you can find a DIR that it may be good, it may be, if you want to drink it. The noise level, I mentioned that, I'm trying to do this fast. The fault. At one of the first meetings we went to with Mr. Musselman and his group, showed a diagram with things, there's a big fault where they're going to be plastic. I said, Mr. Musselman, isn't there a fault there? Isn't that an earthquake fault? Oh, it's not important. We won't put it on any more maps. We didn't mean to put it on that map. Well, that'll solve that, right? I've had people tell me they're having sinkhole problems on our land right now. They're adjacent to his mining because of the testing they're doing. They haven't even started yet, and we're already having sinkholes. I'm sorry, this is not a good idea. I'd like this little town, and I'd like to stay here. But I can't stay here with all the dirt that's going to be there, for the new roads we have to put in, the noise levels, and the truck drivers. They're going to import their own people, they're going to import their own food. It won't help Grass Valley, it'll help them, not us. And will he continue? I don't know. Thank you very much. I don't want this mine here.
Thank you, Catherine.
Hi there, my name is Callum Grant. I live at 10006 Parkview Lane in Penn Valley. I'm a homeowner. I'm here to share my grave concerns about the proposed DEIR, which was supposed to provide critical real-world information to the Planning Commission and to the community at large about the real impacts of this proposed mine and that it will have on our air, on our water, on noise, and in general on our quality of life here in Nevada County. These impacts are not theoretical. We have a lot of historical data about the impacts of hard rock mining, much of it from right here. Concerns about these very real impacts are what brought me here today, and I think a lot of these people. And yet the DEIR, as an effort to provide real-world data, is woefully inadequate. It vastly underestimates the impact to local wells, certainly in the number of wells. Even the NID board expressed doubts about a number of wells affected as low as 30. It decouples the theoretical proposed cleanup of the Centennial site, considering it fait accompli, a separate matter, throwing the impacts of that site completely out the window. The noise pollution assessment takes into account initial construction, but what about blasting, hauling, dumping 1,000 tons of wastewater and tailings a day? The data in this report does not reflect reality. It has to be revised and it has to be recirculated. We have data on how air quality affects kids' lungs. We have data on how mine waste destroys groundwater, destroys streams, contaminates. We also have a lot of data about Rise Gold and their history of broken promises, of fudged data, and of environmental disasters that they've left behind and just walked away from. We have data about their disregard for the concerns of local communities.
We do need to keep this on the DEIR.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Look, the impact on groundwater alone, water is more precious than gold in Nevada County. It just is. And the impact on water alone warrants a reevaluation, a reassessment, and a recirculation of this report. We cannot get this wrong. If we get it wrong, it will be an absolute disaster, not just for Grass Valley, but for the whole county. The report does not reflect reality, it's inadequate, and it needs to be revised. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin.
Yeah, I'm Steve Baker, 13975 Windsor Morning Drive up in Nevada City, top of Banner Mountain. Lived there for 26 years on a well. I'm commenting on the risks to the private domestic water wells created by this project. My background is unique to the issue of private wells. I'm a California registered geologist, certified hydrogeologist, been doing hydrogeologic work for 42 years. Completed a 10-year groundwater study in our county, Nevada and Placer counties, and looked at the domestic well vulnerabilities. Also, I submitted the draft EIR comments for the Banner Mountain Homeowners Association back in 2009 when Emperor Gold attempted to open the mine. Based on what I've read in the draft EIR, I am concerned about the community. Dewatering the mine and its impacts on domestic wells is currently, based on this draft EIR, undefinable, unpredictable. There are some fundamental data sets that are biased and were used, and they're hanging their hat on. And the monitoring data, it's not long enough in duration, and its resolution is not nearly good enough to be useful for answering these types of questions. I'll first answer what's wrong or missing, and then we'll go into what we can do about it, okay? Rise Gold has 4 data sets. They use the Emperor Gold's groundwater monitoring data, 95 to 2007. 2002 was missing. The problem is they only sampled water levels once a month. That's not enough. You need high resolution data to get any usable, reasonable information out of it. And you've got to remember, this is an 80-year project. Okay, we need long data sets if we're going to make predictive, provide predictive opinions. The precipitation data and the water levels in the Rise Gold Mine shafts. Okay, they used daily precip data And then they used 15 water level readings throughout a 16-year period of time and concluded that there wouldn't be an issue. Same problem. The resolution, the frequency of sampling, is not long enough. The computer numerical model that you've heard about by some past people here, it's not the right one. It's a wrong tool. I mean, if you have a job that requires a hammer, but all you have is a screwdriver, I think they use a screwdriver. It doesn't help solve the problem. The numerical groundwater mines or models are great for answering some of the questions on this project, but not this question. They're of no value. We need details on this one. And what is missing is they use well completion reports and they use stacked water level readings. What they needed to look at was the pump water level depths and the shallow most productive fracture depths. Those are the critical data points, and that wasn't even talked about, not even considered. Lastly, Rise Gold, they followed the conclusions of the USGS back in 1984 regarding groundwater and fractures. And if you would reiterate that, 25% or more of the wells that were producing greater than 5 gallons a minute were actually below 215 feet. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Chair Greeno, may I just ask to check in on, see what number speaker we are on for information for people outside of this room? 14.
Commissioners and staff, I'm Jim Bear, 128 Sierra Blanca Court, Grass Valley, and I'm honored to see you again. And I particularly empathize with you because as a former planning commissioner for Grass Valley, I think you have a hell of a job ahead of you. I've been a scientist at Stanford, Rome Research Labs, and Bell Labs, and have applied my experience to evaluating the DEIR. I'm also a business owner in Nevada County. Rise Gold is claiming that science in the DEIR proves their proposal is safe for Nevada County. Several scientists, including myself, find that to be false. Our extensive analysis of the DEIR concludes that numerous mitigation measures will not lower the impacts to less than significant as claimed. For me, the most important impact is air pollution because it will endanger many people far from the mine, miles from the mine operations, just as wildfire smoke affects the whole region. While diesel exhaust will have unmitigatable negative impacts, it is asbestos and silica that are most dangerous to us. Airborne asbestos leads to cancer and eventual death. So will there be harmful airborne asbestos? The DEIR finds asbestos in about 32% of the drill hole samples, representing rock that will be brought to the surface. But 19 drill holes providing 40 samples could not possibly represent 2,085 acres of mineral rights. That's one sample per 65 acres. That's generalization from insufficient sampling. There's probably a lot more. Unfortunately, asbestos fibers are very small, about 0.5 microns. Being submicroscopic leads to harm. Asbestos cannot be filtered, can travel indefinitely in the air, and penetrates deeply into the lungs. The DEI mitigations treat asbestos as dust that can be kept out of the air by spraying water, washing vehicles, tarping the hauling trucks, etc. The proposed mitigations are actually copied from the California Asbestos Airborne Toxic Control Measure, which is for visible dust emissions. I suggest no one will see particles 1/1,000,000th of a meter long. Dust is visible, asbestos is not. There are dozens of other issues, such as the need for testing the 3 million pounds of rock excavated every day. I conclude as a scientist and a 20-year county resident that air pollution from the proposed project cannot be mitigated. Thanks.
Thanks, Jim.
Morning, my name is Mike Shea. I live at 11069 Cedar Ridge Drive. So the mine is in my backyard. The other side of my backyard fence is the mine property. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about noise. I know it's been covered, but I'm gonna give you some specifics about why the draft EIR is insufficient. So according to the noise and vibration study that was used to create the draft EIR, figure 3 shows my house is number 28. Table 6 in that study says the ambient daytime noise at my house is 51 decibels. And according to the study, the engineered fill operation is going to take place 500 feet behind my house. And currently, there's just forest back there. There's no mechanical activity, there's no human activity. So the 51 decibels that I'm hearing has got to be from Brunswick Road, because that's the only place that noise can be coming from. So the study says the following equipment is going to be used to place the engineered fill. So diesel haul trucks that are going to dump between 50 and 100 20-ton truckloads out of steel beds 500 feet behind my house, bulldozers, motor graders, excavators, compactors, water truck, a front-end loader, and a auger blending plant. And table 17 of the study predicts that all of this equipment will generate only 47 decibels. So that's less than what I'm hearing now. I find that inconceivable. Let me go on. According to the noise and vibration study, the mineral processing will take place 2,000 feet from my house. Table 6 says the nighttime noise at my house is 44 decibels. Well, I didn't know that. I thought it was quiet. I'm gonna have to shut my window at night now because it's so loud. I didn't even realize it. Table 22 has predicted the cumulative noise from all nighttime mine operations will be between 26 and 29 decibels at my house. Once again, it's 44 decibels now with no mine, but when the mine's there, it's going to be even quieter. Isn't that wonderful? You can call me dumb, but I don't understand how hoisting over a half a ton of rock per minute, so if it's 1,000 tons per day, if you do the math, it comes out to a little bit over a half a ton a minute. They're going to take half a ton a minute, 85 feet above the surface, drop it into the steel-lined concrete silo, then put it on a conveyor 335 feet to a processing plant, grind it down, and all of this is going to be quieter than it is now. Doesn't make sense to me, and I maintain that the noise study that these figures came from are inadequate. They need to be redone. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Ricky Colby, and I live in District 3. I did live in District 5 for 45 years. And I want to tell you my experience dealing with an underground gold mine called Rise Gold Corp. Labor Day weekend 1995, we heard the sound like an explosion. It rocked my house. A short time after this, Ciscon deepened Grizzly Hill well. The day they tested Grizzly Hill well to see how fast it recovered, my well started having problems. On September 17th in the AM, I had horrible, undrinkable water, and by afternoon, I had no water at all. So I'm that person that I was a well owner who turned on her tap and there was no water. We had an environmental impact report that sounded a whole lot like this environmental impact report. Ciscon Gold Mine was always out of step with the way they were supposed to handle things, and they let it slide. This story goes on and on and on, and I can't tell you all of it, but this mine's going to operate for 80 years. Just think what they can do. Ciscon had one accident. It blew a hole in our aquifer, an F-16 fault. And they're going to go on for 80 years. How many accidents like that can they have in that 80 years? And how are they going to fix it? They're not. They're going to have a big accident like Ciscon did, and they didn't have enough mitigation money to cover all of our expenses, and they're going to pack up, go away. Ciscon took out bankruptcy. We ended up having to clean up the mess. The cost of water in our city has been raised just because of the drought, let alone the amount of money that they're going to take for this. At least Ciscon was able to plug the hole, and some of the old wells come back, and some of the new wells revived, And what they did when they revived is the clay turned to powder while it was being dewatered, and the heavy minerals, when the water came back in, rushed into our wells. And I had to go through chelation for 2 years for aluminum poisoning that filled my new well up. I had to have 2 filtration systems.
We appreciate your comment. The project comment will come later. If you have anything else on the EIR, please present that at this time.
Well, I don't think their water plant is adequate, basically. I think there's surprises, and I think that my planning commission at that time didn't realize what kind of damage could really be done, and I wanted you to know that there's going to be real damage done.
Thank you so much.
My name is Martha Turner, and I live at 10860 Dolores Drive, Grass Valley, Supervisor District 3. I'm a retired nurse practitioner and nurse midwife, and I am not, as Dawn Rogers referred to, as a busybody. I've lived most of my time in Nevada County since 1960. I was a Forest Service firefighter as a young adult, and in 2015 we lost our home to a forest fire. Which makes this subject dear to my heart. My DEIR comment today is condensed from 10 pages that I've written as a written comment on the chapter of 4.13 titled Wildfire. And I request that the following matters be further reviewed by the planning commissioners before a recommendation is made to the Board of Supervisors. I was not reassured by what I learned. The report suggests that the mine site is immune to dangers of a wildfire, and yet there is forest on both sites, and the Bennett fire in fact burned a number of acres on the Centennial site just last year. The report minimizes the risk of fire in our region. In fact, there have been 16 fires in Nevada County since 2015. The report does not adequately address how mass evacuation of residents, along with the additional 312 mine employees, will be handled. Quite disturbing is the statement that in the event of a wildfire, fire officials will request that the mine shut down. What sort of authority or enforcement is in the word request? While truck traffic is recognized elsewhere in the DEIR as significant, in this part of the DEIR, it states that the impact of truck traffic is less than significant in the event of a wildfire. This makes no sense. There's no discussion in relationship to wildfire about the trucks carrying the explosive through town or the transferring of these explosive materials before they are stored underground. The report contends that the vegetation management plan makes wildfire danger insignificant. Our home had a well-defined, defensible space, and it's still burned to the ground. The report states that the presence of 24,000 gallons of diesel fuel on the site will have no potential for fire danger or environmental catastrophe. No potential. It also states there will be less than significant risk of flooding, even though it acknowledges that mine tailings do increase water runoff. What happens to the homes located along Mill Street that we see along Wolf Creek? We've all seen those backyards being flooded when the creek rises. Yet there's no consideration of the impact of an additional 1.2 to 3.6 million gallons of water each day going into the creek. I ask that I focus this analysis on the chapter, and along with common sense tells me that what it's saying is not accurate. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha.
My name is James Hall, H-A-L-L. I live at the intersection of Main Court and Beaver Drive, just south of the mine site. I became aware of the arrival of Rise Gold into the area in the spring of 2017 when I was awakened at night by 2 loud explosions. Spent me weeks to find out that Emperor Gold was gone and we had a new company. I spoke about noise problems that I was having in the fall of 2017 before this board. They have been ongoing ever since then. My concern is lack of sleep and how it affects the body. Not mine so much. I'm 95 years old and I won't hear it much longer, but my neighbors and children will. It's a continuous, ongoing rumble under the house. I've attempted to contact my supervisor without any luck, but I'm not quite sure what the answer is. I'm not satisfied that Rise Gold says that they're going to mitigate a problem. Since I've had the problem for 5 years and supposedly there's not even anything going on underneath the house. But it goes on the average of 12 to 16 hours a day on a nightly basis. And I think it's going to need to be stopped. It's just going to be, if we're having this much trouble with no mining, I hate to think of what it'll be when it gets on in the future. So I hope that this organization and the people can do something about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James.
Hello, my name is Gary Perazzi. I live at 13997 Emerald Court in Grass Valley. I'm a well owner and my home is located above the Idaho-Maryland Mine mineral rights area. I've lived in that peaceful and beautiful area for over 30 years, and I'm also a member of the Wells Coalition. I live in District 3. After reviewing the DEIR well mitigation plan, I'm concerned about impacts to my well and other wells in the area of the mine. The report provides protection for up to 30 wells along East Bennett Road, but it doesn't lay out a mitigation plan for the few hundred other wells in the area. The report doesn't even acknowledge a risk to the other wells in the area. The DEIR well mitigation plan states, quote, all potentially impacted wells are located in the East Bennett Road area. Domestic wells outside this area will not be impacted. End quote. The report fails to demonstrate that this statement is true. There can never be 100% certainty in a hydrogeologic model and what wells will and will not be impacted by dewatering of the mine. That's because the model is based on assumptions and predictions. The hydrology predictions are a best guess effort because we really don't know for certain what the groundwater response to dewatering in the mine will actually be, especially in fractured rock. Even the principal hydrologist for Itasca that worked on the hydrologic model for Rise Gold said in the February NID board meeting, quote, with fractured rock, there will always be uncertainty, and during my career, there won't be any 100% confidence in predictions, end quote. The DEIR is inadequate in that it does not sufficiently account for the uncertainty in the hydrogeologic models and assumptions, and fails to acknowledge the risk to all wells in the area. It also doesn't present an attainable plan on how to mitigate for those wells that fail, get contaminated, or are impacted due to the dewatering of the mine. We don't want a repeat of what happened in 1992 when the San Juan Ridge Mine hydrology report stated, quote, water wells in the water supply wells surrounding the site are predicted to undergo very little or no impact to mine dewatering, end quote. The hydrology assumption proved to be false and created a disaster when 3 years later the mining operation tapped a high pressure water burying fault line and flooded the mine and depleted groundwater.
Thank you, Gary.
Good morning, members of the Planning Commission and staff and members of the community. My name is Jennifer Hansen. I'm the General Manager for the Nevada Irrigation District. I am here on behalf of the district as well as on behalf of our board this morning. We do have a comment letter that we will be submitting regarding the draft DIR, but we also thought it prudent to make our comments in person as well. The draft EIR did depict a potable water line being constructed in the East Bennett area in order to serve water to the 30 residents identified to be potentially impacted by the project. However, NID will also request that there is an interconnection in the Whispering Pines area that was not contemplated in the draft EIR, and we would like to see that portion of the project be included. Secondly, we have concerns related to the mitigation measures for the 30 properties that were identified to be potentially impacted through mine dewatering activities, and specifically related to the mitigation measure related to requiring the applicant to pay for water consumption for those parcels. In the water supply assessment, it was indicated that it was estimated that each one of those parcels utilized approximately 0.4 gallons per minute per dwelling. And in the draft EIR, the mitigation measure for consumption, for payment consumption, is limited or capped at 400 gallons per day. And the 0.4 gallons per minute per dwelling is actually 576 gallons per day. Additionally, we do not feel that it is appropriate that the mitigation measure be essentially expired at sale of the property, and instead of running with the parcel owner, we would like the mitigation measure to run with the parcel itself. We have additional concerns related to the estimated 30 wells that were estimated to be impacted through the water supply assessment, as well as the hydrology work that was completed. As previous speakers have said, all modeling is based off of a number of assumptions as well as data and unknowns that have to be included into the model. And so we would like to see the extension of the area of impact to be addressed through requiring the project applicant to provide financial assurance or some type of surety, whether through money in escrow or through the securing of a bond, to also address any wells that would be potentially impacted in the areas of Woodrose, Greenhorn, and Beaver areas. We have estimated that this potential cost, if these wells were to be impacted, would be in the $14 million range. So we therefore respectfully request that the draft EIR require a mitigation measure, that the applicant secure a bond to pay for any potential impacts, and that amount for the 5-year dewatering period. Additionally, since the operation of the mine will far exceed the initial dewatering period, it would be prudent to also include
she needs to keep us in organization. She represents 5 minutes. NID. She needs to talk. 5 minutes. I'm told I get 5 minutes.
2 more minutes.
Okay, 2 more minutes. 2 more minutes. I can talk fast.
Thanks, Jennifer.
We also request that we also request that the groundwater management plan require that the monitoring wells also be placed in the area and be placed at the average depth of those wells. And then lastly, our final comment is related to the Wolf Creek discharges. We do serve well over 700 irrigation customers, and obviously water quality is the utmost important to us. But we also request that mitigation measure be placed within the draft EIR that requires daily monitoring and public availability of water discharge data, so that we can ensure there are no stormwater impacts associated with capacity. There is limited capacity on Wolf Creek, and if you're not monitoring those discharges, it could easily become overwhelmed during the storm event. And with that, I sincerely appreciate your time, and thank you for the extra 2 minutes.
Thanks, Jennifer.
All right, that was worth coming for.
Hi, my name is Teresa Huck. I live at 11536 Lower Circle Drive in Grass Valley. I am speaking to you today on a different subject that is located in 4.7-1, the summary table of the draft EIR regarding the impacts of human health. There are significant and unavoidable impacts to human health that cannot be calculated by this draft EIR. I rented a home on the Lava Cap mine site in 2010 when it was filed as a Superfund site. At that point in time, someone was supposed to knock on my door and tell me that I was living on such a site. but that did not happen. And my son and I, as a result, ended up with life-altering mercury poisoning and will be living with that for the rest of our lives. This draft EIR cannot possibly look at 80 years of mining and how that will impact human health. And the main and concise point I would like to make to you today is that we are no longer an industrial community that can continue to mine at the expense of the residents who live here. I would like to thank you very much for the effort you put forth and for honoring our rights as citizens. And I would really, really like to request that the draft EIR be redone in whatever way. I'm not educated in these matters to truly look at the impacts of human health, not only in the dewatering of mines, but in groundwater modeling, understanding that a storm changing that can change the flow of mercury and arsenic, cadmium, chromium, and lead in our water. We are already living with that legacy, and we as a community do not know how to deal with the impacts from a legacy 100 years ago. So I ask you, please do not even reconsider this project until we know how to deal with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa.
And I'm a resident of District 4. I'm a biologist with Master of Science, and I'm the director of Gold Country Avian Studies, so I respectfully request the full 5 minutes. Our organization focuses on aiding the research and education in the Sierra foothills. The Idaho-Maryland Mine Project DEIR is deficient in that it does not adequately address significant impacts to the stretch of South Fork Wolf Creek that passes through Empire Mine State Historic Park and the meadow the creek transects, known as the Bennett Street grasslands. More specifically, it does not address significant impacts to the 98 native bird species that my organization has captured or detected in the grasslands, all of which are protected by the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. This list includes 4 rare special status species, including the critically endangered willow flycatcher. The DEIR is also deficient in that it does not address the simultaneous impacts of a 300+ unit housing development currently under review by the City of Grass Valley, which is proposed on Bennett Road between the Centennial site and the grasslands. The DEIR's biological surveys of the South Fork Wolf Creek riparian area were also severely lacking. My understanding from Appendix F10 is that the only biological survey that occurred was a VES during which 2 people walked the creek on August 29, 2019. Not only is it likely that many amphibians were missed during this late, hot, dry time of year in a warming climate, but also there is no evidence that any bird survey was attempted. If so, bird vocalizations are almost non-existent at that time of year, and locally breeding migrants could have already departed. Since December 2016, I've run a year-round bird monitoring program in the Bennett Street grasslands, performed with a permit from the park and in conjunction with Bear Yuba Land Trust. The Land Trust holds a conservation easement on approximately 7 acres within the grasslands along South Fork Wolf Creek. At the grasslands, we perform detection surveys and run a monitoring station where we operate 10 mesh nets to passively capture wild birds, then band and release them. The grasslands are a rich, biodiverse ecotone that connects a conifer-covered hillside to Riparian Creek corridor and a very wet meadow which drains from the hill where the Centennial site is located. At the Brunswick site, the project proposes to put its untreated wastewater into a vibrant pond rich with wildlife. After treatment, the water will be discharged into the creek, which flows downstream through the grasslands where we run the monitoring program. On page 471, the DEIR states, California black rail is the only special status species that was identified as potentially occurring on the sites. And the technical memo for the biological resource assessment states, the habitat associated with South Fork Wolf Creek does not provide suitable habitat for other CESA listed species. This is absolutely incorrect. On at least 15 separate occasions, we have captured or detected California special status species including yellow-breasted chat, yellow warbler, olive-sided flycatcher, and the critically endangered willow flycatcher, which as long ago as 2003 was estimated to have only 400 remaining breeding pairs. During 4 out of the past 5 years, we have captured more than 7 willow flycatchers in the creek vegetation. In my NOP comment letter of August 2020, I listed 3 special status species observed in the grasslands, including willow flycatcher. And in March 2021, I also submitted to the county planning department a folder of all our California Natural Diversity Database special status species submissions. Therefore, the DAIR is deficient because it does not acknowledge significant impacts to these special status species, and the analysis is also deficient because it did not consider relevant facts known to the county. Given that the grasslands are located between the Centennial site and the Brunswick site and across the street from the proposed housing development, extensive additional studies need to be performed regarding the significant impacts that the project will have on the grasslands and the riparian corridor. These should include, but are not limited to, general bird surveys, surveys of special status species, willow flycatcher specific surveys during breeding and migration periods, research on impacts of temperature change and flooding that the creek may have on invertebrates, and studies on the effects of flooding on ground nesting birds, of which there are numerous resident and migrant examples. Additionally, we have documentation of birds, bobcats, bear, coyote, mountain lions, and other wildlife moving freely between the grasslands in the area of the proposed housing development and the Centennial site. And additional studies must be performed to identify the significant impacts that the additional traffic and noise created by the proposed housing development and the mine project would have on wildlife, their migration corridors, and the aesthetics of the grasslands of Empire Mine State Historic Park. I also want to clarify that a second meadow, located on the Brunswick property, also rich with bird life, and I have a photo here, lies directly to the east of the vibrant pond where the project will pump its untreated wastewater. Studies must be performed to determine if diverting water from this pond into a treatment facility could dry this meadow.
Thank you, Allison. And we will take 10 more folks before we break for lunch. So if you would let the 11th person back know that we will reconvene. I'd like to do a 30-minute lunch break, if that's acceptable to the other commissioners.
And I just want to let you know, I have photographs of the pond, photographs of the 4 species, and for all the commissioners, I have...
Those will go in the EIR. Thank you. Yes. What number are we on? 23?
29.
You're 24?
I'm 26 and 25, sorry.
That's great.
My name is Becky Gillespie, and I reside in District 1 at 14130 Banner Lava Cap Road. I grew up in Nevada County and moved back here with my husband and children in 2016. I'm here today speaking on behalf of Earth Justice Ministries, a local nonprofit that brings a spiritual and moral perspective to bear on issues of our day and links concern for creation with concern for human well-being. We echo the concerns of everyone who is speaking out on the inadequacies of the current draft EIR. Today, we focus on what is called aesthetics, the mine's cumulative impacts, and the need to repair harm done. Aesthetics are downplayed as a concern in the draft EIR, but beauty is a value. Beauty touches people's hearts and minds. It is Nevada County's natural beauty that brought so many of us here, and that brings so many visitors. The sights, the sounds, the smells of this place, the taste and feel of clean water, the fish in the streams, and the wildlife. People come here to experience the beauty of the natural world, to experience a deeper reality that puts things in perspective. To many, that natural beauty is like church, reconnecting us to what is most meaningful in life. The draft EIR must adequately list in detail the mine's specific aesthetic impacts. Mitigations listed in the draft EIR will not overcome the mine's cumulative impacts, which would work together to decrease our quality of life by increasing air and water pollution, dewatering wells, harming Wolf Creek, increasing greenhouse gas emissions, injuring plants and animals, raising noise levels, damaging roads, and yes, wounding the beauty of this place. The final EIR must list in detail how these specific impacts act together and how Rise Gold addresses this cumulative damage. Finally, there is still much damage to repair from the gold rush including genocide committed against the Nisenan people and other nearby tribes. The earthen people were so damaged that the toxic legacy continues today. Healing from the past includes respecting the earth that gives us life, making reparations for harms done, restoring the land and air, and changing our ways so that we are in a right and good relationship with this place, its people, and creatures. We cannot heal from the past if we continue adding to the harms by opening this mine. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky.
Good morning. My name is Jeff Kane. I've lived in Nevada County most of my life. I'm a medical doctor, and I'm very concerned about air quality. Our county's air quality, as you might know, is already terrible. The American Lung Association gives us an F grade for our ozone levels. We've all long been considered Sacramento's tailpipe as vehicle emissions there funneled to here. And wildfires, which will intensify, cause entire weeks that our air quality management district labels very hazardous. If you look at the DEIR table 4.3-19, it's on page 366. It's a list of toxic airborne substances that the mine will emit daily while all mitigations are in place. In other words, this is the best case scenario. Do the math, and you'll see that despite all mitigations, however effective, the mine will release 8.5 million pounds of substances known to be toxic and carcinogenic into our air over the next 80 years. We can't take this. We can't take this. Our mortality rate from chronic lung disease in this county is already double the statewide rate. One especially vulnerable group is seniors, whose numbers are 3 times the statewide rate. Another vulnerable group is our children. They will absorb more toxic airborne pollutants than adults do because of their more rapid respiratory rate and their longer exposure during these 8 decades. The report ignores impacts on the thousands of Nevada County residents who will be born during the operation of this mine and have no say in the issue. The many mitigations that the DEIR specifies are too numerous for any agency to monitor or enforce or, more importantly, to afford. In any case, the mining industry itself has a record of neglecting or circumventing mitigations, as you probably already know. Again, we can't take this. The DER table 4.3-19 states that even if all mitigations are effective, the mine will significantly poison our air, inevitably sickening us. Nevada County cannot tolerate any additional air poisoning. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Hi, my name is Larry Engel. I'm at 12116 Horseshoe Lane. That's above the mine that's underground in 2,500 plus acres that nobody's talking about sufficiently in the DEIR. They're going to remove my groundwater. This isn't an abstract question. Each of us on Banner Mountain owns our own groundwater. We have a right to compete for our water that's in the ground that they're going to ship 24/7, 365 somewhere down the Wolf Creek, which is one property away from mine. I have filed a 120-page objection, or am filing a 120-page objection. I'm waiting for some biology data with 50 fatal flaws, and I'm going to mention just a couple of them. And I'm often using in that, which I urge you to read, the DEIR's own words against them, particularly matched up against what they haven't talked about, which is the Rise Gold Corp 10K and 10Q they filed with the SEC. they gotta have consistent messages, and if they're telling the SEC one thing and they're telling us something else in the DER, that's not good. Why consider my analysis? I'm a retired bankruptcy lawyer. I worked at one of the nation's leading law firms with decades of experience in failed mines. I know as much about anybody as bankrupt mines. You want to know why there are 40,000 abandoned mines in California today that are on the EPA list? Go check it. I can tell you, and they start with failed mines with unrealistic DEIRs that become EIRs, and there's no economic feasibility. I know you don't want to talk about economic feasibility, but the courts will when we get to that. Let me get the first flaw. I'm speaking quickly because I'm concerned about my time. The draft uses hexavalent chromium. Nobody's talked about that. CR+6. You may remember the old movie, horror reality movie, Aaron Brockovich. They killed Hinkley, California with hexavalent chromium. You know something they showed you this morning, cement paste that they're going to put in the mine to shore up the old mine and the new mine. 24/7, 365 for 80 years, they're going to use this toxic hexavalent chromium. They don't talk about that. There's not a single mention of that chemical in the hazardous section of the EIR. Why is that? Why are they hiding that? If you Google hexavalent chromium, you'll find an infinite number of horror stories. If you check the EPA website, there are hundreds of damning studies. And the EU is banning it in 2024. Now, thanks, Larry. Is that it?
They're dragging you off. But you did good, Larry. How much more time do you need?
Charles Price. What's? Am I getting an echo? I'm at 12655 Little Deer Creek Lane in Nevada City, not the city proper, but the county.
Charles, I was informed that you have a song, is that right? That,
yeah, I do.
It brings the EIR question to music.
Yes, and I just want to say a little statement before I perform it that it clarifies. COVID generated a workplace experiment, and corporations and workers alike have seen the benefit from working at home. Now Nevada County is competing for these well-employed professionals and their families who are migrating out of the state's urban areas. I don't see this draft document addressing the effect of proposed mitigations in total on our county's overall quality of life for its residents, attracted to visitors, and potential new residents. Grass Valley and Nevada City are the cultural heart of Nevada County. Please demand a study addressing the total effect of putting a big mining operation in that heart. Sorry I got to sit to do this, but I ran my hand over the table saw and I can't play as hard like I used to, so now I'm playing slide on my lap.
Charlie, do you
can I have to do it faster?
For God's sake, Charlie, why couldn't you do this ahead of time?
Take years and years to recover from the terrible, terrible gold mining scars. Generations of good folks working together to recover this beautiful county of ours. They'll pollute our water, pollute the sky. Homes will lose value, wells will dry.
43,000 gallons of water a day. Here where droughts often come our way. Toxic waste dump getting bigger by the hour. Another big drain of our electric power. Don't let so I don't have the time to finish this.
Thank you, Charles.
If you go to Charlie Price on the YouTube, you can hear it.
We know where it is. Thank you.
Hello, good morning, Commissioners. My name is Itira O'Connell. I live in District 1, and I've lived in Grass Valley for 20 years. And I travel on Brunswick next to this proposed mine project at least twice a day. So I'm extremely concerned about the traffic that will be unloaded onto our street. This will divide our community. So the environmental impact report does not really address how this will divide our tourist section from a major industrial endeavor. So we currently have this area zoned as light industrial, and they want to waive that to be a major industrial. To me, it should have stopped right there. This is a neighborhood, and this shouldn't even be something we're dealing with, but here we are. This is also a Nisenan land. It is sacred, and I didn't see any interview with the Nisenan tribe. I've spoken with the Nisenan tribe, and they're opposed to mining this gold and taking this out of the country and taking resources out of our sacred land. So I would like to see the draft environmental impact report address the Nisenan people. And that is under the section of cultural and tribal cultural resources. It's a little line in the draft EIR, but it's not really dealt with. Okay, so we also have, the trucks are not listed under the aesthetic section, but obviously a truck every 10 minutes at minimum would be definitely not aesthetic in our community. They list the evacuation of these people as not significant or less than significant, and I beg to differ that 600 people trying to get out of a mine in an emergency and unloading onto one of our roads that would, for an evacuation, would be a significant issue. The height variance has already been decided, no larger than 45 feet. And they want to go 165 feet, end of story, not happening. Get the hell out of here. We don't want a 165-story building in our community. And also we don't want lights all night in our community, and they talk about that as not being significant. So this will put our community at risk, and that's already suffering from decades of mining, and it's time to put an end to this project. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Itira.
Matthew Bolter, Nevada County. I'd like to give each of you a lead pamphlet, a couple of lead pamphlets that came out of the, hello, you guys there? I'm here, I'm right here. I took my day to come over here, okay? Yeah, but are they even watching? Do they even care? And that's what I want to start out with. So here's a lead document for you guys. Grass Valley's water doesn't even meet federal lead standards as it is, okay? We want to keep dumping toxic shit into our environment. Let's start with the meetings. No chairs, people sitting in the sun, many disabled elders, no parking. I watched the county stifle the citizens by doing this type of thing and using attrition as a way to get rid of people that have a legitimate comment and a legitimate concern. Much like the marijuana issue and the Centennial Dam issue with NID, this process is severely flawed. My personal history on Brunswick Road growing up, the spring for South Fork Wolf Creek started in our property there at Cedar Crest. Growing up, there were two 24/7 sawdust burners going at the mill. Would we consider doing that again? Because we do need a logging industry. But we probably wouldn't consider putting that stuff into the air. But here we are, doing it. Exploratory drilling, well, they were here just doing their practice stuff and just looking around for the mother lode. They were fine for water, air, soil, tree violations, noise. So they couldn't even do the initial process. You would think when someone would come in and want to open up something really big, they'd do something really good first, like show how capable they are. These guys screwed up even the exploratory drilling. Then we go to the local mine watch, Allison Ranch Road. I was the one that reported all that toxic stuff running into the creek that enabled that project to be done on Allison Ranch Road. Water infrastructure, last night in Grass Valley, a house had to be ventilated for several hours because of chlorine in the water, because of a water faux pas that the city had by Memorial Park. Our infrastructure is so antiquated and falling apart in this town, and we want to add more. More houses, more people, more traffic, more everything. Go outside and look at the parking. And I just have a feeling that as the planning commission, this is a done deal, because I've watched this project for a long time with the previous owners too. I watched NID put an infrastructure for it. I watched that development on Greenhorn go in. All this stuff that's going to benefit the mine way before they even applied. And I watched the Board of Supervisors be literally giddy about this when it first came up.
Thank you, Matthew.
My name is Mark Michelle. I'm currently residing in District 1 at 13640 Canterbury Drive, approximately 1 mile due east of the proposed Brunswick mine site, on a welled 3-acre parcel with NID nowhere in sight. Professionally, I'm a semi-retired general contractor and a licensed professional engineer in this state. I've lived here for 22 years now. While I feel the draft EIR is inadequate for a host of reasons, not including the sheer absurdity of reopening a very large hard rock mine a mere 2 miles from the town center of Grass Valley, a town that has 13,000 residents. Let's compare that to when the mine was reopened in 1919 by Aaron McBoyle. Back in those days, there were 5,000 people in Grass Valley. Interestingly, when he closed the mine in 1957, there were 5,500 people in Grass Valley, an increase of 500 people. Obviously not a big boom for the gold mine. The draft EIR does not address any of the potential adverse effects of the gold mine on those 13,000 residents who live and breathe and have businesses and count on tourism to support their cause. My main concern relates to the inadequacy of the draft is water. The initial dewatering is estimated at 2,500 gallons a minute for 160 days. Doing the math, that equates to over 1/3 of a billion gallons of total water. After the groundwater, seepage will require continuous pumping of approximately 1,000 GPM per the draft. That's per minute. In a month, that's over 43 million gallons a month, every month, for the next 80 years. Now my well. I live about a 20-minute walk from the site of this massive dewatering. The thought that this dewatering is going to have no effect on my well professionally is just hard to believe. The draft EIR needs to better explain, better model, which is computer speak, for no proof, what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Reduce this down a little bit, I'm short. Good afternoon, and thank you for taking the time to hear your constituents here in Nevada County. My name is Teresa Dietrich. I am the Legislative Affairs Chair for the Nevada County Association of Realtors. We have 5 areas of concern regarding the draft EIR. First being water. Many people have been talking about water, and I certainly don't want to beat a dead horse. However, we're very concerned about the fact that the water is going to be pumped out of the ground, which could cause subsidence. We didn't see any notations in the draft EIR addressing the potential for subsidence because of the water table being changed by all the dewatering. We're very concerned about traffic, and that doesn't seem to be sufficiently addressed in the draft EIR. Specifically, there's so much current traffic congestion, and we're wondering how that's going to affect public services, emergency services, and schools and school buses. The habitat and contaminants, we're really wondering how the amount for the bond for restoration was determined, and is that truly adequate to return that site to a natural and healthy state in the future? That's a big concern. It doesn't seem like it actually says what that state would be in the draft EIR. Additionally, we're concerned about noise. It didn't seem like the draft EIR really covered sufficiently the noise levels created by 24 hours of operation and all the truck traffic. And then the electricity situation. It doesn't seem like the draft EIR is addressing the need to decrease utility usage in Nevada County based on the Climate Action Plan. And we'd like to know if you guys could ask that to be updated. And in closing, I'd just like to say that housing and workforce supply are not topics addressed in this EIR, yet the Association of Realtors encourages the county to ensure that they are included under further study in the economic impact report. We will be submitting a letter with more details, and we just want to thank you for contacting us with the further information after this meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Teresa. All right, so we're at that point where we're going to recess for lunch and bathroom, and we will reconvene at 12:30.
All right, folks, so we just heard some public comment from a lot of people here concerned about the Idaho-Maryland Mine. They're going to be taking a lunch break here. Sounds like they're going to resume at 12:30 here at the Board of Supervisors chambers here. This is a Nevada County Planning Commission meeting going on regarding the proposed Idaho-Maryland Mine reopening by Rise Gold Corp. So, yeah, we just heard a lot of public comment period here. I'm going to end the live feed, and people can go back and check that out. It's not too late to come down here and make your public comments heard. They will be resuming at 12:30. I believe the meeting is going to end today at 6. So if the public comments go up until 6 p.m., they will be stopping the meeting and then resuming it again at a future date.